So today's training is focused on providing some additional information for all of you who are currently project leaders or considering on being a project leader for the Ramsey County Master Gardener program. And Brianna and I put together kind of a suite of slides that provide some background information. And I also look to all of you for a lot of the content as well. Throughout the presentation, we'll have some discussion questions. I encourage you to either verbally share some of your experiences, or you can include some of that information in the chat window as well. And again, this will be recorded, and we'll be including some of our templates that are kind of background information with the training online. And we always appreciate your information on how we can make this training better in the future. What we're trying to do is just provide some background information, again, for some of you who have been project leaders for quite some time, but also individuals who are maybe looking to step into a leadership role. So let's get started. So we'll be covering some of the basic expectations on what it means to be a project leader, provide some of the background information and resources available to you. And so again, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to include them in the chat. And I'm not always able to see some of the chat communications. So if you do have anything you would like to call out and I'm not noticing it, please let me know. To start off with, I cannot thank all of you enough. When I look across this room of volunteers, to look at the amount of time and effort, your time and talents that you've contributed to Ramsey County Master Gardener projects, it is incredible. It really takes individuals like yourselves to raise your hands, to step forward, and to get involved with some of our projects and make them successful. So thank you for being project leaders, and you're part of the backbone of the Ramsey County Master Gardener program. You bring the expertise and passion to the program. Many of you have started projects from the ground up, so you're always thinking of new ways that we can improve and enhance our volunteer programs, and you have the ability to reach out to many of our project partners in our different communities throughout Ramsey County. So thank you again. So reasons to be a project leader. Many of you have different motivations and reasons on why you are project leaders. And some of them come from your background, just our personal interests, or maybe your connection with a community partner. I'd be curious to hear from many of you and why you decided to be a project leader within the Ramsey County organization. Would anyone like to share their thoughts?
I guess for me, there was a need for the project, and then it fit well with my schedule, and it was nearby to my home, so it was convenient for me.
Thank you, Jennifer.
I think for me, I just never got over being a teacher, and once I retired, I had to find other ways to be involved in educating kids, and this seemed like a good way.
I'm kind of the other way around. I was asked, and even though I swore I would never be a leader of anything again, once I was asked, I couldn't say no.
You sound like me, Sherry. When I retired, I decided I was only ever going to be a doobie and not a manager anymore. But somehow or another, you'd gravitate back.
And I think, Sherry, you raise a good point. It's sometimes that ask of maybe we didn't always think about ourselves as being a project leader, but sometimes someone maybe have asked us to step into that role. And so I think that's one important role all of you have as project leaders, whether you look at volunteers that are currently involved with your project, is just to make that ask. And I always like to, when I'm talking with interns or new individuals that are just starting out their volunteer experience, I really like to try to emphasize leadership at all levels, and that you don't always need to be a project coordinator or a project leader to really make a difference in the organization. And I think of something like the plant sale. If a volunteer raises their hand to take some plants and maybe raise them, from seed and make them part of the plant sale experience, they are being a leader. They raised their hand, they chose to get involved, and maybe that's step one on getting involved with that particular project. So really think of it as leadership at all levels, and everyone has different entry points to the organization. And thank you all for, again, whether you raised your hand to be in that leadership role or whether someone asked you to be a project leader. So some basic volunteer role descriptions. And I'm gonna stop with the presentation and jump over to another template here. And what we're trying to do with a lot of our parts of the Ramsey County Master Gardener Program is make things consistent, to have consistent information across our projects and our programs. And are all of you able to see the volunteer leadership role description? Is that a yes, thumbs up? Okay. And so what we're trying to do with a lot of our volunteer projects is to make sure the information is consistent across the projects, and also as we look at leadership succession. And so if someone's considering and stepping into a leadership role, they know kind of what some of those expectations and responsibilities are with that project. And so what we're trying to do with many of our projects, if the role description doesn't currently exist, is to get one out there. And so you can see some of the basic fields that we're looking for, whether it's this has information on the some of the leadership roles, but also some of the volunteer roles and how that fits into meeting the mission of our program here in Ramsey County, but also how it may fit into the mission of the State Master Gardener Program as well. And so we'll have some of these basic templates like you see here with this volunteer role description online for you to consider. So if your project doesn't currently have a description like this, we can work with you to set that up. And so I just thought, again, we'll have these templates on our website, and so we'll get those links out to you after the training here. So what we want to do, make sure we do with our projects is make sure that our projects are aligning with our program direction, and that some of the expectations of you as a volunteer leader is part of that kind of organizing, communicating with the volunteers that you work with. In some cases, some of our projects have a very small group of individuals that are involved. It might just be a handful of folks. In other cases, it may be, if you look at the plant sale, there's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of individuals that are involved with that effort. So, there's all different types and levels of communication. In some cases, there's the need to secure and maintain resources, and whether that's physical resources, or sometimes it's even financial resources. And we do have financial resources available within our organization, but in some cases, some of our project partners come to the table with financial support as well. An important part of you as a project leader is the reporting. We always want to be able to report back on the successes and the outcomes of our projects. And some of that is done through our volunteer database with the State Master Gardener Program. In other cases, it comes through you sharing your photos, documenting your experiences, sharing some of those quotes or stories from the partners that you work with or from some of the participants. And so yeah, it's always important to have that reporting piece, to be thinking of how you can continuously have a consistent feedback. And some of that reporting happens back to our overall volunteer base. By reporting and sharing those success stories, sometimes it gets the wheels turning. It gets other people thinking of how they can maybe replicate this project in their own neighborhood, or maybe how they can work with another community partner. As a project leader, I think always be thinking of succession planning, or how you can bring in more individuals to your project itself, and to help make your life easier, and also helping to maybe in some cases to expand your project if that's warranted. And then finally, as a project leader, looking for opportunities to improve and enhance your project along the way. it's always look at, at the end of the year, end of your project cycle, to think about, what worked well, what were some of the challenges, and what are some ways that we can grow this program in the future. Some of the things that may not necessarily be within your expectation as a project leader is dealing with serious, situations of conflict. And again, we don't have a lot of those that arise, but that's where I, as a project coordinator, could come in and say, if you have a conflict with a project partner, or maybe it's the site or the situation that you're working with. At the end of the day, you guys are volunteers, and I want to make sure that these experiences are fun and enjoyable and rewarding to you. So if there's ever situations of conflict, or if you're not feeling comfortable in a situation, feel free to let me know, and that's where I can perhaps step in and help to resolve those situations. And then some of these are related to like the program direction and program priorities. What you're doing as projects often feeds into our project direction. And so you're supporting, as we're working with the implementation of our strategic plan, what you do in the community helps to support those efforts. So you aren't necessarily kind of, choosing the direction, but you're really in a supportive role. And many of the projects help to work to support what we want to do as an overall organization. And when it comes to fundraising, in some cases, some of you have been great with generating funds on the local level, but we do have funds within our board and within our investment accounts. And just as a note, we are going to be starting up a new grant program. Starting in 2023, the funds will be available, but we're using some of the interest from our investment account that will be available to support Ramsey County projects. And so you'll be hearing more about this towards the end of the summer, but it'll be a typical grant application for all of you as project leaders and project coordinators to submit a grant application if you're interested in getting additional funds to support your project. So stay tuned on that. So basic things on recording your project leader hours. As project leaders, you're aware of the actual activities, the day of, volunteer hours. But I always encourage you to think of all the planning and preparation, whether it's an email or a phone call or just kind of doing some brainstorming. All of that is part of your volunteer experience. And so I want to really encourage you to do your best to record all those hours, because that really documents all of the work that it takes to make these projects a go. So, and what we try to do with our individual volunteer reporting is to make sure that all our Sign Up Genius pages are clear in terms of where, volunteers as well as you as project leaders can report these hours. So some of the tasks that also are included for you as a project leader that would be counted as hours is the communicating, working with the Sign Up Genius pages, organizing the materials, and just kind of preparing, whether you're helping to set up a farmer's market or whether you're helping to make a youth program go, all of that behind the scenes work counts as volunteer time. So succession planning, and realize that you as project leaders, some of you, may not want to be in your particular volunteer role for a lifetime, or you may want to try something new. And so this is an opportunity to look at, what's next? How can you get other individuals involved with your projects? And so that's where we go back to that role description, is to make sure we have good information out there. So if we're trying to promote this program or promote a leadership role, and that so that we have some good background information to share with others. In terms of succession planning, what we want to try to do is making sure that we have a lot of our project leadership positions full by the end of the calendar year. So if you find out that, you want to maybe transition out of a leadership role, try thinking that towards the end of the summer, early fall is a good time to think about maybe finding a new person to step into a particular position. And that last bullet, you are responsible, but we are also here to support you in that effort of finding a successor, with your project. And in some cases, it may not be just one individual, it might be a co-leader type situation. So there's many different ways on carrying a project forward. But the sooner the better. If you find out that you may want to be transitioning out of a leadership role, if you could let us know, that would be appreciated. So in regarding to finding a co-lead or a successor, here are some of the recommendations. I'd be curious to hear from some of you. What are some, success stories that you have in terms of finding either additional people to step into leadership roles within your projects, or maybe even finding a successor with a project that you've been involved with in the past? And anyone have any kind of stories to share and what's worked well?
Darren, it's Jean Buck.
Yes.
Okay, I was just going to tell you, our barn garden project, it kind of grew over the years and it became really too large for one person to deal with. So we decided to divide it up and have project coordinators taking certain parts of the barn gardens. And we tapped our committee to do that. And we got some great people. So we have like 5 different project coordinators, I think 6, who are dealing with different aspects, which makes it more manageable for the person. And then, because I had done it, I'm still there kind of as a resource, to everybody to make sure. And we'll see how it goes. This is the first year, but that's how we decided to look at it. And everybody is stepping up wonderfully. So that's one example.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, Jean, of realizing your project has grown and grown, and what are some opportunities that you can delegate or kind of divide some of the leadership. You're all supporting the common goal of the demonstration gardens at the barn, but now you have all these new leaders that are involved with some of the specific components. So thank you for sharing that.
You bet.
This is Susan Oven. I started as a project coordinator because I was very interested in the project. And as a project coordinator, then I found that recruiting volunteers and successors was easier if you looked at people that really were enthusiastic about your project. And quite often they were reluctant to become leaders because they didn't think of themselves as leaders, but just having that passion for the project goes a long way.
Definitely. Yeah, I think sometimes just getting over that hump of thinking of, I often hear the comment, oh, I don't feel like I'm qualified or that I know enough to step into a position. And so that's where it's the earlier that you may want to be stepping out of a position, or you want to be getting more people involved with your projects. It's, and I think Cherie, you mentioned this as well. It's just sometimes it's the ask. It's someone just saying, hey, would you like to be more involved with this project, or would you like to take on this component? And sometimes it starts small and it builds up from there. But it's that ask is that personal ask. If we send out a message in the newsletter saying, hey, we're looking for a project leader for X project, the response rate is often not that great. And it's often that personal ask of someone that we've seen more success. Is there maybe another story out there that what's worked well for finding a successor?
Hi, Darren.
Cherie?
Darren, it's Cheryl Brady.
Oh, Cheryl? I'm going to go Cheryl and then Cherie.
So when Susan asked me to take on the plant sale last year, I felt like I had good organizational skills to pull something together. But the first thing I did was reach out to all the people I could think of who had had previous experience with the plant sale and asked for their help. And we set up committees to pick out the plants, and we have Joe and Jennifer for the tomatoes, and we have the marketing and communication people. And so there are really strong people as heads of each of those teams. The one thing that I feel I have not done anything on is looking for a co-lead or a successor, which is on my to-do list after the plant sale this year, because I think that's a really important thing. And I wouldn't want someone to have to jump in and try and take it over without working with them for a little bit of time. So if anybody has any suggestions on good ways to find somebody, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I think you raised some good points there. You gathered enough information, you gathered those people around you for that information sharing. And I think that transition period is also important. And it helps people feel more comfortable and confident in stepping into these positions. So, but yeah, if anyone has suggestions for Cheryl, feel free to share them even offline as well. We'll do one more with Cherie. I think you're on mute, Cherie.
No, I'm not. I found that I had always enjoyed time that I spent with people in a farm market, and there was one close to where I live, because I live in an apartment, not in a house, and I live in a rental, so I don't garden in my own space. I garden just in other spaces. At any rate, I found that as soon as we were able to return from all of the COVID stuff, I went immediately to the Roseville Garden because I knew the people who ran it. And I told them that I was a master gardener and I was interested in resuming the services that we'd had there before. And we hadn't been there for a year and a half. And so I just kind of decided that we needed to do this. And I started doing it, and then sort of the rest of the master gardeners got caught up with me. Originally, I had a table, a few books, and a chair, and I brought them all. And so then once master gardening started up again, I sort of was part of it. And I was part of that whole, I guess, core team that included the SNAP people and the garden manager and so on and so forth. And we acquired a tent, and that brings me into something that I think is very important. There was a bad misunderstanding about space and use of resources. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but basically, I think it's something that we all need to remember. And that is that really our resources are community resources, and we need to share whenever we can. The short time I've been working as a master gardener, so many people have shared so much with us in terms of space and chairs and tents and all kinds of things, and we need to do the same.
I think I was looking at ways that we can improve our partnerships in the community and establish our brand as a Master Gardener program, but also connect with our community partners. So that's great. Thank you, Cherie. So let's continue to move on here and talk about some of the tools available to you as project leaders. And as I mentioned, we're working with adding some of these tools to the website. And I cannot compliment our web team enough. I mean, our website has really improved in terms of the content that's provided to you as volunteers, whether it's the continuing education information, whether it's the pages available to our interns and mentors, but also our general projects and how people can learn about what's available to them as volunteers. And so we will plan to add more and more information to the website, but we also have some of these available as individual links. But some of the basic information, our materials available for you for your projects. We always have handouts and handout templates. What we've seen over the years is that although we do still have paper resources, we are not handing out a lot of paper, at farmers market and community events. We've kind of streamlined things to more of like a bookmark type situation. We do have tons and tons of presentations available. You know, and also what's nice with the Master Gardener program is we have a lot of resources here available at the Ramsey County level, but we also have a lot of connections to the state Master Gardener program, as well as other county Master Gardener programs. And so if there's a presentation or a, you know, an experience that you're looking at building out, I can think of some of our, maybe as some of our youth programs, and you know, if you're looking for a niche presentation, many times we can put out the request to some of our other colleagues from our other counties and say, you know, have you, you know, presented on X topic to this audience. And in some cases, some of that information is already out there. So there's no need to kind of recreate the wheels. So again, I wanted to really emphasize, we have a lot of great presentations here available locally, but we also have a lot of resources. Encourage you to check out the State Master Gardener website. They have all the toolkits. The toolkits are basically content-based, whether it's the Water Wisely or some of the you know, pollinator type information. And so all that information is available through the State Master Gardener website. Again, we have a reference book library. All those library resources are available in the diagnostic lab. And so you're welcome to you know, refer or use any of those reference books. We also are working on kind of building out some real basic reference kits available to some of our community events, as well as like our farmers markets and our yard waste sites as well. And so for those in-person activities, you know, we do have some basic microscopes, some, you know, some laptops and projectors. I know a lot of our presentations are currently being held online, but there may be a point where we do return to some of these activities in person. One thing that we're really working on improving is our signage and our branding. So one thing we really want to make sure is if we're at a community event or a farmer's market, things like that, is that people are aware that we're with the University of Minnesota Extension and the Ramsey County Master Gardener program. And so whether it's a sandwich board sign or even the tablecloth, or even some of the branding happens with the clothing that we wear, whether it's the Noon and Gold clothing and things like that. So always looking at ways that we can identify ourselves as the Master Gardener program, or even just identifying ourselves with the University of Minnesota Extension. And one thing we do have regarding the tote boxes, those are often the tote boxes that go forward with our community events and our farmers markets. We do have seasonal giveaways. One thing I'm always interested in hearing from you is, what are some meaningful giveaways that we can provide to our community events? And I know in the past we've had some, you know, seed giveaways or other things. And I would be interested in your feedback if there's things that I can be, you know, purchasing from the program coordinator level to make available to you. Because I know I just recently met with Jamie Ossendorf, the previous coordinator, and we were kind of going through some of the previous giveaways, and there's a couple of drawers in the office that are available for those. And now that we're returning to more face-to-face opportunities, you know, what are some appropriate things to give away, whether it's to our youth partners or whether it's just something at a farmer's market. And my personal view is I don't want to try to give away too much like unusable like plastic stuff. But if it's something like a seed packet or something, a usable information that a person can take home, because it's when you see someone, when you go to like a vendor fair and people pick up all this stuff and you see them walk down the row and then they may just throw that item away at the end of the row. I want to make sure that we try to, you know, get our message out there and try to have some usable stuff at the same time. So regarding the giveaways, appreciate your input, and you can follow up with me later. We also have demonstration kits, whether it's some basic kits on composting. You know, we also have some basic information on some setting up some things like setting up microgreens, you know, getting those situations going. And then we also have the tents and tables available to all of you as volunteers. Some of those tents and tables are kind of designated towards individual projects. So an individual farmers market may have a tent and a table for the full season, but we also have some of those resources available if you just want to check them out for a special event. And if we don't have enough tents or tables, we can always purchase more. So as we're getting out to more community events, that's one thing that we're going to be assessing as well. So that's kind of a long list of materials that are available to all of you. I'm curious, what has been some helpful information or helpful materials that you have found successful, whether it's, working with a community event or working with a specific audience? Are there specific resources that you have found to be helpful that have been maybe interactive tools or things that maybe we can be purchasing more of for the program? I'd be curious on your input on this one.
Darren?
Yes.
This is Nancy Berry. One of the things that I thought was really helpful in years past were those information wheels, those spinning wheel
Yep.
kinds of things that have, questions on them that you can ask people, you ask them the questions, see if they know the answer to it. Those are really nice ways to engage people if you're at a community event or a table somewhere. That's been helpful, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge when you're at a community event. How do you draw people in? And whether it's an interactive element. I know I was at a Carver Scott plant sale last fall, and they actually had an aquarium full of jumping worms. So that was a teaching tool that they drew people in, and there was people lined up just to check out these nasty little critters. But like the spinning wheel or some interactive element to bring people in, I think is great. So good suggestion. Thank you, Nancy.
I had suggested before the bookmarks because they're small, they're fairly solid stock, and they've got a place that you can write information on them that are individual to the person who gets it.
Definitely. Yep, I totally agree. Thank you, Sherry.
Hi, Darren. It's Julie Coopet.
Hi, Julie.
I'm in the Ramsey County Fair, and the spinny wheel was a fantastic draw in, particularly with lots of kids and even with adults. And giving away seed packets was phenomenal. Pencils were great. But I had seen something at another fair, and it was just a quarter sheet of paper that said, "I help the environment by," and then all the kids wrote something, and we put it on the wall behind us. So by the end of the fair, we had a lot of quarter sheets of paper with writing on it that showed what people want to do. And I think kids like to do that.
That's a good suggestion. It's whether it's an individual training like this or a fair like that, it's where people feel like they can contribute and their voice can be heard. That's great.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Thank you. Is there any other suggestions out there?
Right before the pandemic, the University of Minnesota had an activity for lower level grade school children of pollinators, and it had bracelets with Velcro and little balls that one could use that the kids could actually use to interact with one another to demonstrate how pollinating worked. And it was a lovely little project. I'm afraid it's gotten lost because it was introduced right before the pandemic stuff.
Yeah, just an interactive element there. And this probably goes to Ed and Susan. I'm excited for your project this upcoming year, working with farmers markets and engaging youth. I mean, I think that's a great example of, bringing in that audience. And I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun interactive elements to get that particular audience involved and also informed on horticulture topics.
I think this is Megan Finney. Along with what Cherie was saying, they put out signs that said things like this pollinator cafe or something that you could put in the garden, which I think is really good for engagement. I mean, I guess depending on the project, but if people are drawn in by the pollinator flowers and see that, then they're interested in knowing how that's a cafe and that kind of thing. So I like those signs.
I can think back when I thank you for that suggestion, Megan. I can think back when I worked with a watershed district where we'd have, I I adopted this yard, or it's a way that an individual can put just a small sign in their front yard saying that they're part of an overall initiative. So I believe, I love bees, or I love pollinators, you know, something like that.
Yeah.
That makes them part of the broader project.
And then I would suggest then as well, Darren, this is Jennifer, that if we're working on the brand, make sure that everything that you print has the, you know, Master Gardener logo on it, or the University of Minnesota Extension logo on it, so people know that's where it came from. And then if their friend wants one, they know where to get one.
Yes. Yep, I see Cherie has a sign up there. It's, you know, the pollinators, always kind of bringing the branding message, bringing them back to the program and knowing where they can find additional resources and additional information. So I think that's good. Well, great. Well, these are all suggestions, and I continue to welcome your additional feedback on ways that we can enhance the materials that we have available to all of you as project leaders. So some of the services available, some of the other ways that you can help to support your programs, you know, there's many different ways that we can support your programs on the website, whether it's some of that is communication with other volunteers. You know, in some cases it's promoting your program through our social media. You know, our social media, our Facebook and Instagram are great for getting our information out there. We also have a quarterly newsletter that goes out to our community partners, whether it's residents or other individuals who signed up for that. So there's many ways to get information out on your project. So encourage you to connect with our communications committee. There's an opportunity for us to help support you through Sign Up Genius pages. I know I have a few of you that I'm working with presently to get your Sign Up Genius pages completed. Some of you are administrators of your own pages. One thing with the Sign Up Genius program is we have a limit, I think, of like 10 individuals that we can have as program administrators. Those are people that can maintain their own Sign Up Genius page and, you know, change things along the way. But both Brianna and I are able to assist with setting up those Sign Up Genius pages as well. And we have a basic template so if you're looking at setting up a volunteer opportunity, we have a basic template of what information that we'd be looking from you, whether it's the number of volunteer slots, what's the volunteer experience, date, time, things like that. And then also another service is the budget assistance, and that's something that we're always working on further refining, and that's where the board of directors can assist with supporting your projects through financial assistance. And kind of going into more detail, as I mentioned, we're kind of still, you know, we're still working out, you know, the whole process of, you know, long-term projects as well as one-time requests, perhaps. If you're looking for additional funding, feel free to ask, you know, whether it's me as a program coordinator or working with the board of directors directly. And one thing that's always helpful with, you know, your projects, and you look at the 5 W's, the who, what, where, when, and why. And so whether you're submitting an individual expense, or if you're working with our treasurer to get one of your expenses reimbursed, try to include those 5 W's with all your expense reports. And then also as you're submitting maybe a request to the board, thinking about, you know, what's the basics of your project, who does it involve, when does it happen, why is it, how is it relevant to our overall organization. And so, again, we have long-term projects as well as we can have more of a one-time request. And some of the one-time requests actually turn into more longer-term projects. What often happens is, you know, if we get that one-time request, we see how our project works. And if it's successful, you know, that can turn into, you know, a longer-term project for the Ramsey County Master Gardener Program. As I mentioned with the Sign Up Genius pages, we do have some basic templates that we'd like all of us to follow. One thing I really love about our Sign Up Genius pages is the upfront information that includes where you report the hours. It includes some of the really basic information, who to contact. And so there's some consistent language across all our Sign Up Genius pages. And as I mentioned, we have a limit to the number of administrators, but we can always help to support, you know, building out your Sign Up Genius pages. It's a way, again, for all of our volunteers to figure out what volunteer experiences are available to them. And it's a way for us to communicate with individuals who are signed up for particular experiences. There's many different ways on sharing our signups. Typically, our signups go out every Saturday morning and Monday evening. That's a way to keep it consistent, across the board. And we do have a Sign Up Genius administrator training that Brianna just did at one of our recent monthly meetings, and that's available on our website as well. So again, important information as you're setting up a Sign Up Genius page. It's a basic timeline, the date, time, the number of volunteers you need. Often we have, for a typical volunteer slot, we'll have a slot for a Master Gardener volunteer paired with an intern. With our interns, that first year experience, we want them to shadow many of our volunteer experiences and kind of get their feet wet and kind of learn what our volunteer opportunities are all about. And so that's where we often have those two slots paired together. Also with the Sign Up Genius, it's the basic roles and responsibilities. So a volunteer feels comfortable if they're going into a farmer's market, they know what's expected of them. They know if they have to bring a water bottle or a chair, or if they need to bring sunscreen, some real basic things like that. Or maybe they need to review some information ahead of time. That might be something that's required of a particular volunteer experience. Or there might be a required training that happens. I know as we're gearing up for some of our yard waste and compost sites, one thing we're planning is to do just a little training overview ahead of time so people are comfortable going into those experiences and that they know what to expect and how to be more comfortable and successful with that particular experience there. I'm not going to walk through a lot of the details of the Sign Up Genius page. Again, this will be one of the templates that's available on the website. And I think I can walk through some of the specifics of what's included with those pages. So inviting volunteers, that's one thing we do recommend is if you do have a volunteer experience that we try to get it out as soon as possible. At least 2 weeks before, it's recommended, at least about a month before. I know I'm currently working with, we have some special events that start up the last Saturday in April 30th. So I'm going to make sure that they become live by Monday. So that will allow us at least a few weeks to fill those volunteer slots. And one thing all of you as project leaders can help us do is just kind of check to make sure some of the volunteer slots, if they're full. I know what happened last year as we returned to some of our face-to-face opportunities. I'll just call out like farmers markets. Occasionally there was a time slot or two that maybe did not have volunteers signed up for a particular time period. And then that's where we had to do some additional recruitment. Or there may be a case where just an intern is signed up, but not a Master Gardener volunteer. And we always try to have a Master Gardener volunteer paired with an intern, so an intern is not out there by themselves. And so whatever you can do to help us monitor your Sign Up Genius pages to make sure that the time slots are full. And if they're not full, work with us on, providing some additional recruitment or communication with our volunteers to fill those slots. And as I mentioned, it's some things fill up just like that, and other things are a little bit more of a struggle to get all the slots full. I can think back of, there was a Saturday in late September last year that I think we had over 75 volunteer slots on one particular Saturday. So there's just particular days where we are in demand, and it just happens. And I think that was a case with one of the yard waste sites that we weren't able to fill all the volunteer slots. So that's where we had to go back to the Ramsey County project folks and say, we apologize, but we don't have, volunteers available for this particular day. But just so our partners are aware, if we're not able to fill, a particular slot, the further in advance that we know that information, the better. And just some more information on, the filling the gaps with the volunteering. As I mentioned, Brianna provided a recent training on Sign Up Genius, and that went into more detailed information on, someone needs to find a substitute or if they need to swap with a particular information. That training really went through a lot of that basic information that's available to you as project leaders, but also available to all our volunteers and how to navigate the Sign Up Genius experience. I'm curious to hearing from all of you, like, as I mentioned, some of our volunteer experiences, those volunteer slots fill up right away, and other times it can be more of a challenge. But what are some of the advice that you might have for other project leaders on finding volunteers or getting volunteer slots to fill up? Any thoughts or words of wisdom out there?
It's Jean, Darren, from Barn Gardens. We have a lot of volunteer slots in the summer, and what we've done in the past is if someone has signed up and then we get a message from them, unless they're terribly ill or something, a real emergency, we ask them to find a substitute. And that we've had good luck, especially among interns, because they know each other and they simply swap slots. Find someone else on the list, see if they will swap with you. And that has worked in many cases.
Thank you, Jean. Any other suggestions?
I find with some of the youth projects, especially if it's something new, people might be a little hesitant to sign up. But if I go back and look at people who have worked on other youth projects, so we know it's something they enjoy, if I then reach out to them, they'll often be willing to try the new thing.
That's a good suggestion. And what we've tried to do with some of our projects, some of our core areas, is to get people to sign up, say what I'm interested in, say the plant sale, or interested in youth programs, at least so we can have a list to go off of if we are looking to, recruit some additional individuals, rather than just sending it out to everyone. We can really focus our efforts. So I think that's a good suggestion.
Darren, is it possible that within the directory that we could have a brief list of interests?
That's one thing we are working on with our new member committee, is to do an interest survey. One thing we've also encouraged is just scanning the, all the intern profiles within the last few years are available online. And so we can kind of scan, look through that information. If someone has a expertise in, say, graphic design, or say they're a former teacher, or they're interested in, working with a particular interest group. So that's one way, but we are, to answer your question, Cherie, we are working on building out that interest survey. So it can be another way that we can tap into individuals by scanning either the individuals within our volunteer base, because as our volunteer base grows, it can be sometimes daunting to look across, 300 plus volunteers to figure out kind of a who's who and who is interested in what areas. And so we're working on helping to streamline that process.
Darren, it's Susan Oven. I have a question. Back when I was more active, the policy was that if you signed up and could not fulfill your sign up, that it was your job as a volunteer to find a substitute. Has that changed? Do we not tell interns that it's up to them to find a substitute?
That is still the policy, Susan, and that we really try to hit that home with with the signups is to really take that sign up serious, and that and also just kind of putting it out there that many people rely on, if you're signing up for a volunteer opportunity, there's many people that are relying on you to step forward and can follow through with your commitment. So yes, the expectation is that they should be finding a substitute.
And I know life happens.
Yep, it does. And so that's sometimes a challenge with interns as they come into the program, just to make sure it's clear with them that as they're signing up, it may be exciting to sign up for 20 things all in the beginning, but also being realistic about what you can do and what fits in with your schedule and what you can follow through with. So we want to make sure that everyone is realistic, and but also, you know, we're all adults at the same time, and want to make sure that we do follow through with those commitments. And if, like you said, if someone's not able to, you know, if something, again, life happens or conflicts happen with schedules. So, but the sooner someone knows with finding a substitute, the easier it is. Sometimes I'll get the message the day of and say, you know what, I can't go. And, you know, then it gets to be a little bit of a challenge to finding that substitute. But, you know, we do have a good group of individuals that, you know, in some cases that we can find that substitute on that last minute. Jean?
I was just going to say too, and last year was the first time it happened, and it was a strange year, but I had some people, generally interns, who I'm sure just didn't know, who would simply delete themselves from a sign up with no message, no nothing. And I'm sure it's because they didn't know this information. So I would reiterate what Susan was saying, that if we make sure interns know that they have a responsibility to, you know, you can't just delete your name 2 days before, because then that leaves the rest of the group shorthanded. That would be really, really helpful to have that conveyed to everybody. So
I think that's a good point, Jean, and we can work through our communications channel, whether it's at our monthly meetings or working with our mentors, and to make sure that message gets out in multiple different ways. That you know, part of the volunteer experience is, you know, obviously kind of scanning and looking to see where your interests lie, but following the recommended process for feedback.
Yeah, I'm sure these folks just didn't know. I'm sure that was.
And
okay.
Darren, I'll also add, it seems to me that over the years, the one thing that interns have the most difficulty grasping is that we are a volunteer-run organization. This is not like the Red Cross, where they have a huge paid staff and you sign up and you report. I mean, I understand that you are a paid person, Darren, but basically, when you become a master gardener, it takes a while before people grasp that this is all on us. This is our organization, and we make it succeed or fail.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That goes back to one of my first slides, is thanking all of you for being in that leadership position, but also noting that leadership happens at all levels, and that it takes all of us, you know, working together to make these projects successful and to be out there in our communities. So yeah, I think the more that we can really emphasize those points, that it is and that's why we're really trying to emphasize the word volunteer. You know, it's like we're you know, it's one statistic that's always impresses me at the end of the year when you look at the amount of hours that we contribute and what the equivalent is to paid staff members. It's a pretty impressive, you know, reporting number. But back to your point, we're volunteers, and to make that message clear with the interns, I think it's important. Let's I'll continue moving on here. I want to try to get you guys out of here, hopefully shortly, within an hour here. So I think we just kind of raised some of these points here. I mean, this is more like canceling an event. And that's where I mentioned, you know, the situations last fall where we maybe didn't have enough volunteers for a particular event, like the yard waste sites, you know, trying to let the partner know, you know, well in advance, if at all possible, or at least kind of give them the heads up. You know, kind of what I was doing last fall is saying, you know what, we're having difficulty filling, you know, slots at these 3 sites. I'll keep you posted. And in some cases we were able to fill those slots, and in some cases we were not. So in some, you know, it's as I mentioned, you know, with a Saturday last fall where we had over 75 volunteer requests on a particular day, you know, in some cases we're able to fill all those, and in some cases we just don't have the means to fill all of our volunteer requests. And so for the most part, I think we do a good job of filling all our requests, but in some cases, whether it's the time, location, or just the situation itself, we're not able to always fill everything. So basic things with communications, best practices. We have a great catalog, a great resource that kind of outlines all of our volunteer projects, and we're always looking at building in new projects. Generally, a project is added into our catalog after it's been around for a couple years. If it's been out there, it's been tested, it's maybe if a project is seen to be successful, and that it has some long-standing behind it, that we can continue it for many years, that's when it gets added to the catalog. And in some cases, what we're trying to do is if a project is sunsetted, or if it is maybe on pause, that we are still planning on having it in our appendix session and still have it as available. So you can kind of go through that historic log of, oh, remember back when we did this project, or when we worked with X partner. We still are planning to keep that information around, but it wouldn't be in the body of our full catalog. Our volunteer fair we just held in March 22nd. We had a good group of interns, and some of you were involved as project leaders to describe your projects. And that's one of many opportunities that we use to showcase our projects, as well as at our monthly meetings and through our newsletter as well. So the opportunities to recruit volunteers, again, happen through our, whether it's the volunteer fair, the newsletter, the website. We have many opportunities to showcase projects there. But also there's opportunities to share our stories with the public, whether it's on social media. As I mentioned, we have our quarterly public newsletter. And I have a question for you is, what are some ways that you have seen to be successful for sharing information or success stories on your projects? Any examples out there?
I can tell you one, and that is a friend of mine invited me to speak to the retired Democrats. And these aren't necessarily people interested in gardening, but they have friends who may be interested in gardening. And I would, and I took along some of our materials, and I gave a short talk, maybe 20 minutes, to the group, and then I talked to individuals. And it was about going to a public group to tell them who we are and what we do and how to get a hold of us if someone needs us.
Yeah, I think getting out to our project partners. I know last year I presented to a couple of Rotary groups. Many of us are involved with our faith community, or whether it's another nonprofit. So it's an opportunity to spread our word and just kind of share some of those stories and make those connections happen with our community partners. So I always encourage you to be thinking about ways that we can tell our story, not only internally, but also to our broader community, to our University of Minnesota Extension community, and also to our other Master Gardener programs. I mean, that's where I learn a lot from other activities and projects happening around the state, is just from hearing about some of the reporting that's gone on from other county Master Gardener programs, in ways that maybe we can replicate. I know a lot of other counties has benefited from the good work that we're doing here in Ramsey County, and they have replicated some of our efforts. So continue to think of ways that we can share our stories.
Darren, one more
Yes.
comment on that. I think a lot of times our partner organizations publicize what's happening. I'm thinking of the Watershed District, Children's Hospital, the St. Paul Schools, and maybe we don't always know that they have published something or, announced something. And it would be nice if we can kind of communicate that if they do that, we'd like to see it too, so that we can include that in our recording and reporting.
Yes, I know sometimes you find out after the fact, Susan, that you see this article on one of our partnerships, and it's always nice to see how we're being showcased or highlighted with our community efforts. So, that could be, so one of the things that you communicate with your project partners up front is just talk about different opportunities to get the word out there and ways that we can work together on that. I think that's good. So basic things with communications with our partners, I think it's really important to always be in direct communication with our partners and collaborators, prior to our projects, making sure that everyone's on the same page, that we have the information that we need, and that people are comfortable. I can think of when I gather information, when someone has a request for us to be involved with a community event. Not only do I get the basic information on the date, location, but also I try to get information on who is your typical target audience and what are particular themes or things that you try to advocate at your community events. So if we're having a demonstration or having some other resource materials, at our table, that we can maybe help to have specific information that's in relation to the audience that's attending. And then also kind of some post-event communications, kind of a follow-up. I can think of many opportunities where we can follow up with our project partners, our collaborators, and ask, what worked well? What was your thought of ways that we can maybe improve or enhance our experience? And that's all part of your role as a project leader, is to do those check-ins after the event to explore ways that we can continue our projects and improve them down the road. So there's many different ways to communicate with your individual volunteers involved with your event. Some of that happens through our Sign Up Genius pages. In many cases, that's automated, where a reminder is sent out prior to each of volunteer experiences. But I can think of some farmers market coordinators where they would actually do an additional follow-up with the volunteers, just to make sure that the volunteers were comfortable and had the information that they needed prior to a particular farmers market event. So it really depends on the type of experience or opportunity that you help to manage. But sometimes that pre-communication really helps out to make sure that the volunteer is comfortable and has the information that they need going into that experience. Thinking about those emergency contacts, weather happens, and kind of keeping an eye on Mother Nature, especially with more of our community events, or maybe even some of our youth activities where we might be out in the garden, is to kind of keep an eye on if we need to either move things inside or perhaps need to cancel things for the day, based if there's thunderstorms or other bad weather coming in. And then in some cases, as I mentioned, with the post-event communications, kind of a follow-up with volunteers, just to check in to see what their experience was, and if there's additional information or resources that they need, or ways that they could suggest to improve an event as well. We talked a little bit about this earlier with the conflict management, and again, we don't really encounter a lot of these situations, thankfully, but if there ever is a situation where you do encounter a situation where it's a challenge, is to gather as much information as possible. Sometimes it might be a situation with, I can think back of when I used to lead a youth activity with an after-school program, in that there was a homeless encampment that kind of showed up where we did some of our outdoor activities. So that's where I was able to work with our project partner and just kind of communicate what we experienced, and we were able to shift where we had some of our outdoor experiences, but just trying to document that and making sure that our project partners were aware of the situation and that everyone was on the same page, and that we were able to shift or resolve that experience in the future. So again, it's just a matter of documenting this experience or documenting the situation and letting me know if there's a place where I can step in and either work with the project partner or help to resolve a particular situation. I'm going to keep on moving here. I think we just documented or kind of listed through a lot of the different situations that you need to just describe if there's a situation, and you can just either follow up with a phone call or an email, and we can work through those situations. So thankfully, we don't have to encounter these a lot, but they do arise from time to time. So, and I'm always here to help to talk through and work through those situations. So sharing project stories, we're on the home stretch here, and that's where reporting really comes into play. And that's where you as project leaders can really help to document your projects, to share your successes, and that reporting has multiple different applications, whether it's in our internal audience, to our volunteers, to our extension community, whether it's to our Ramsey County county commissioners. They are always wanting to hear what we're doing as a Master Gardener organization, and then also the broader state Master Gardener audience as well. So as you as a project leaders, some of your projects are year-round and some of them are seasonal. What we do recommend is that you try to summarize your projects and to submit your reporting soon after your project is completed, rather than waiting until the end of the year, October. It's basically, for myself as a program coordinator, there's some reporting that I do in November that is more of like your success stories, more of your narrative. And then after the first of the year, when all of the volunteer metrics, or all of you as volunteers as inputted information into the state Master Gardener database, that's where I'm able to pull out, how many volunteer hours were in the different categories, how many new gardens were created, and things like that. So the sooner that we have some of those reporting and success stories, the better. So basic information, this is a lot of the information that individuals report as volunteers, or you report as volunteer leaders. It's the basic volunteer hours. In some cases, it's the number of contacts. In some, we are able to collect some of that participant demographics with some of our programs, not all. And as I mentioned, with our Sign Up Genius pages, we really have done, I think, a good job of helping to standardize those to have all that information up front, so a volunteer knows how to report their volunteer experience there. And additional information that's always helpful. One thing I know our communications team is really working hard on is our photo library. And so we always encourage you to take photos of your projects. But if you do have, projects or photos of individuals, we would like those photo release forms completed. And those photo release forms are on our website as well as the State Master Gardener website. And in addition to the quantitative numbers, like the number of people, the number of contacts and the number of hours and things like that, we're always looking for that qualitative data, like those testimonials and quotes. I can think with some of our youth programs, when you listen to a young person talk about, this was the best tomato I ever tasted, or some of those experiences that really they're kind of the warm and fuzzies, but they are very important when we help to document our impact to the community and our work with our partners. So if you do have any of those quotes along the way, and I know some of you have been very good about sharing those stories, those are always helpful when we work on our reporting, not only internally, but also to our other Master Gardener communities. And I'm not going to go into too much with the annual reporting form. I think we went through some of the basics of the information that we need to collect, and we might even do an additional training mid-season to talk more about some of the reporting elements and the ways that we can help you as project leaders and help to really tease out more of the information that we could be looking for, whether it's a story on our social media or whether it's a story in our newsletter, or ways that we can focus on some of that information when we share that with our project partners. And things to always be thinking about with your projects kind of after your project is what worked well, what can be improved, what do you want to try next time? Did this work out? Or in some cases, maybe a project is, it gets to be that time where you want to try something new, or it can be a project needs to be sunsetted or maybe transitioned into a different type of experience. So always be trying to document this type of information. And as I mentioned, projects don't always have to be carried through from year to year. It's like, well, we've always done it this way. I think of maybe ways that we can maybe transition a project, or in some cases our partnerships change, or maybe the target audience may change. I can think of an example like our diagnostic lab experience. And the last couple of years we've had that online, and we've had poor attendance at that online experience. So we're we're shifting that and looking at other ways that we still can provide that diagnostic assistance to our residents here in Ramsey County. But maybe it might be through our farmers markets, or it might be through some of our community gardens. So always be thinking of ways that we can, if a project isn't working, things happen. And so don't feel like necessarily that is a failure, but think of it as an opportunity to transition, change, and improve down the road. And always to let you know that there's a great support network out there, whether it's all of you in this room. If there's at times where if you want me to get some of you together just to talk about sharing success stories or kind of working through a situation, that's something that we can definitely do. The board of directors is always there as we look at maybe implementing our strategic planning efforts, ways that we can further tie our projects into our strategic planning. And knowing that I'm always here to support you with your projects, and there's a great volume of experience and knowledge when I look across this room right now. And so recognizing that you're not in this alone and that there's a great support network out there. And that's a lot of Darren talking for the last hour. Hopefully some of this information was helpful to you. And I'm just reading through some of the comments there. And yeah, I see Megan Finney's comment on pictures are worth 1,000 words. I can especially think of some of the great photos that you've included over the years from the children's peace garden, is to see just those little hands in the garden and to see some of those experiences. It really hits home, and you don't always need a long, text description of a project. Sometimes it's just that photo alone that shows about that experience of how that individual is connecting with us as Master Gardener volunteers, or is connecting with horticulture. So yeah, photos are great. With who do you send your photos to? Roger, you can send them to me. I know one thing I'm working with is working with our communications team, Nanette Boudreau, and they're trying to develop more of a photo library so they can have our photos in specific categories, but also have photo releases assigned with them so they know that these photos are okay to showcase on our social media and other venues. So again, the photo release forms are really important, especially when we're working with our youth and other audiences, just to make sure that we have permission to use those with our communications. So we'll be posting some of our basic templates online. We'll be posting the recording of this session, and also, appreciate your feedback on ways that we can improve this training or incorporate other trainings for our volunteers in the future. Because I think one thing we want to try to do is to make sure that someone, if they're considering on a volunteer leader position, that it's not something they don't feel like we want to try to limit the amount of barriers that they perceive. And so we want to make sure that they're comfortable, confident, and feel like they are equipped to stepping into these positions. And again, I can't thank all of you enough for your contributions to the program, and appreciate any feedback. Any parting words from the group?
Thank you, Darren. It was really helpful.
I'd also like to thank Brianna too. She put together a lot of the base information with this presentation, and we're hoping that the trainings that we're providing before the monthly meetings, as well as this, help to provide you the information you need, as well as being able to tap into this information on our website as well. So we're always open to additional feedback, and appreciate you taking a little over an hour of your time here on this Saturday morning. At least it's not warm enough where you're itching to probably be out in the garden. But the spring gardening season will be here very soon. So thank you for attending, and have a good Saturday.
You too.
Thank you.